Hello, welcome to Peccadillo Pictures Sofa Club, a great initiative from the fabulous Peccadillo Pictures to keep us entertained and in touch during the lockdown. This is the fourth in the series, and we will be telling you about the next one at the end of the Q&A. My name's Helen DeWitt, and I'm a film curator and lecturer. I really hope you enjoyed Mixed Messages and have lots of questions for the director Kanchi Wichmann. You may remember Kanchi from her debut feature Break My Fall from a few years ago, which was a radical, energetic and sexy relationship drama set in Hackney. So please, I hope you've got lots of questions at the ready. Please send them to us on Instagram, Facebook or Twitter at hashtag Peccadillo Sofa Club or hashtag Mixed Messages, or on the YouTube chat, and they'll be monitored by our fabulous technical expert, Amelia. So I'll start off with a couple of questions while you're getting your thoughts together to ask about the film. So Kanchi, you lived in the UK for a long time. You now live in Berlin, where the film is set, of course. But you're speaking to us today all the way from Los Angeles. That sounds like a very glamorous and exciting life. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself to sort of set the scene?
Well, firstly, yes, it sounds very glamorous and exciting, but it's all smoke and mirrors. So I won't burst the bubble on that one. But yes, I'm English. I was born and brought up in the UK, but my dad was German. I moved to Berlin 6 years ago, and obviously with the series, that was kind of my friendship circle and the places that I was going, or still would be going if they weren't shut down due to the lockdown, and if I wasn't on the other side of the world. So it's basically like a portrayal of my world, my social circle and my social world in Berlin. And what was the other part of the question?
So what made you decide to move to Berlin from the UK? That might seem like a really dumb question, actually, because I think we'd all quite like to be in Berlin.
It's funny, isn't it? Because everything's changed. I mean, I moved there 6 years ago. Obviously, we had no idea this whole Brexit fiasco was going to happen. And so I guess a big part of it was because I'm half German and I'd lived there before, and I kind of felt like I had this unfinished unfinished chapter, unfinished story that I wanted to go back and pick up again. And I want to add in that I think it was in large part due to my midlife crisis, which I've been riding the wave of for some time now.
In anticipation, I'm sure. It can't possibly be midlife. Not now, not yet.
Yes, I thank you, Helen. That's I've got the blur feature on my face, unfortunately, in the background, so I can't lie about all this. But I moved back to Berlin when I was 40, which was 6 years ago. So I think that qualifies as a midlife crisis. Like a couple of weeks after my 40th birthday, I went a bit mad, packed a Ryanair cabin bag with a broken hard drive, some rice protein powder and some sequin leggings, and off I went. And
some people might call that a crisis. I'd call it an adventure. And you certainly had one when you got to Berlin. So we'll talk about that and talk about the film in more detail in a moment. But can I just ask a little bit about the form first of all? It's a web series. You made it as a web series rather than a feature film. So it's an episodic way of telling a story. So could you tell us what appealed to you about making it in that form?
Well, thank you. That's a good question, and I appreciate you asking it. I think number one, it definitely needed to be episodic because it was this kind of reoccurring experience where at the end of every episode, she's kind of back to square one. So I think in terms of building a narrative flow that one would expect from a feature film, that isn't really there. So that was the first reason, that the story seemed to tell itself in an episodic format. Secondly, obviously it's it's a much more kind of DIY way of working. Very kind of, you can get away with being very low budget and DIY and kind of just working in a kind of grassroots way, which I think once one starts with feature films with the expected cinema release and all that, you've definitely got to up you know, the production values and all of that. And also, I think I really specifically wanted to focus on the actual moment of the kind of mixed messages, like just the moment. So you don't really see where she works or what she's doing before or after the date. It's really zeroing in on those moments. And I think that works really well in an episodic form. But I think if I would have tried to make that into a narrative feature, obviously there needs to be a lot more kind of background information to sustain your connection to the main character and to her story.
I mean, talking of the main character, Ren, I mean, she is fantastic. I mean, part of the sort of, I think, the kind of like dramatic irony of the film is just like, you think people would be queuing up to date her, you know. Yeah, she's rather gorgeous. But tell us so tell us a little bit about, you say it's sort of set around your kind of friendship social group in Berlin, but how did you actually decide on the story or stories that make up? How did you spend a long time writing it? Did it come from lived experience or stories from friends, or completely your imagination, things you might have read?
I definitely spent a long time going on really bad dates in Berlin. Yes, it's based upon, actually it was based upon my experience, and I have this thing where it's like, I think kind of making a film or some form of artwork, I say film because that's my medium, but making a creative work about something for me is a way of making sense of that thing. Like it kind of gets it out of you and puts it at a distance, and then you watch it on the screen and you go, God, why did all those people do these things to me? But yeah, so for me, it's like a way of making sense of the world and a way of connecting with other people. So for sure, it's based upon my personal experiences. But I think what also made me want to, I think if it was just my experience, I would have been like, okay, and spent, you know, a fortune on therapy instead and not spoiled everyone else in it. But it kind of started happening that I talk to some, you know, oh, I had this date last night, and then it'd be like, oh yeah, me too. And it kind of turned out that everyone was having very similar experiences. And then I thought, okay, now I need to write a script about this, because even though it's based upon my experience, it felt very universal. It felt like a lot of us, and not, you know, not, it could be lesbian or, you know, gay man or straight woman or trans guy or trans woman. You know, it wasn't specific to a lesbian experience. It felt like everyone in the Berlin scene, well, I wouldn't say everyone, I don't know everyone, but everybody that I was coming into contact with.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, it does feel very Berlin, which is part of its appeal, because it's obviously the city that's, you know, very well loved and people have a lot of fun in Berlin, and it is, you know, it's an alternative way of living in many ways. But do you'd say it's applicable to whoever might be wanting to kind of find a date or get off with somebody, as we used to say. But do you think, is it specific to the Berlin scene, or would you say it's applicable to sort of London or Los Angeles, or is it very different? Yeah,
thank you. That's a good question. For me, it is very Berlin. It's like, for one thing, no one in London or LA has got time for all this nonsense. Like, and I found in London, for me, it was specific to Berlin, but obviously I've only dated as a queer adult in London, I guess. I haven't really had enough experience in, you know, I haven't done like a world tour of single living.
Yeah.
But for sure, it felt very Berlin, all of these things, not only like the BDSM and the kink and all that stuff, which is commonly what Berlin's known for, the polyamory and all the rest of it, which, yeah, it is, in my impression, is that's the kind of image of Berlin worldwide, that it's this very kind of queer friendly, very kind of alternative, but just the specific, the nuance, the kind of communications and all the misunderstandings and the kind of unmet expectations, all that to me felt much more Berlin than what I personally have experienced in other cities. I think people have a lot more free time in Berlin. I think in London people are like, I've got to get to work, I can't get bogged down with all this nonsense, you know.
Some of it looked like a lot of fun. So we have some questions for you from some wonderful viewers. So Georgia asks, I really enjoyed the songs used. I feel like it was representative of the Berlin queer scene. A lot of them felt quite DIY. How did you choose which music to use? I totally agree with that. I love the music in the film.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you, George, for your question. I'm really, really proud of the soundtrack. And again, one thing about the way that I work is I try to represent the scene that I'm showing on screen from the inside out, if that makes sense. So it's not just that we went and got these kind of actors and signed them up and made them dye their hair pink. And, you know, it was like, actually, those are the people living there. And in terms of the music is all except one. They are all Berlin queer and trans musicians. And I think that's really important. So it's like every part of it, the locations, the music, the cast, everything is kind of part of that scene. I didn't go and get music from other cities so it's, and that all the musicians are also obviously part of, I wouldn't, maybe part of, it's a bit exaggerating, but are kind of connected to the community depicted in the film. And I was very, very, I'm very grateful to those musicians for trusting me with their songs and for kind of wanting to have their music included. It was a really amazing process working with all of them, and they're all really talented. I think we've put I think there's like a Spotify playlist of all the songs which find and follow. That's one thing. We also have it listed up on our Facebook page, the track list, if anyone wants to check that out. And a couple of the bands are bands that I played in. So if the whole film thing doesn't work out, I'm sort of paving the way for it.
Exactly. I was going to ask a follow-up about that. If you could tell us about this amazing band called Hair Shirt.
Oh, well, that's my band with Cal, my friend. We're not currently working together, but we were making music together for a few years, and we're still very close friends. And he's also he's in the series. He plays the Liz Rosenfeld, the amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, so Liz, obviously, as you probably saw, a lot of the people in the series are also, like Liz Rosenfeld is a really amazing experimental filmmaker and a kind of academic. But, well, she's just like got an amazing brain as far as film is concerned. Plus, she's also a performer, as in she does a lot of physical performance and dance and stuff. And she's acting in the first episode. She's the date, and her primary partner, I think it's called Date One's primary partner, that's my bandmate. So it was all very kind of like, it's kind of like a snapshot of that time for all of us, I think. Cool.
So I've got a question from Alexandra, who asks, as a stereotypical queer vegan, well, I found it so funny during the breakfast scene. I'm vegan too. How did you choose? She quotes the line, I'm vegan too.
Yeah.
How did you choose which queer stereotypes to explore? Stereotypes seems a bit cruel to me. Types might be okay, but you know, I think they're individuals.
Probably more intellectual world, isn't there, than stereotype trope or something. But well, actually, I'm queer vegan too, Alexandra, and so it's really nice. That's a really nice question, because it's funny. I guess a lot of the stuff in the series. Well, I really hope that people are watching it and I'm kind of laughing at myself rather than standing outside these people laughing at them, if that makes sense. And I always think that's a fine line, isn't it? Because you're relying on context a lot. But I'm hoping that that's apparent. So I'm very happy to be vegan, and I also like to kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of this stuff that you can kind of joke about, isn't there? And I guess it's quite a Berlin, it's probably quite an everywhere thing now, isn't it? The whole vegan thing.
Which is a really good thing. It should be celebrated. Yeah, absolutely. And encouraged. I'm talking, by the way, in terms of encouraging veganism, you wouldn't happen to have the recipe for the vegan cupcakes, would you?
I don't have it to hand. I think I left it in my pocket. I'll have to.
Maybe that could be posted on the Peccadillo website at some later date if you can find it. I think the few of us quite like the look of those.
That is a glaring unresolved narrative, isn't it?
Yeah. So we have a question from Shiv. The series is really Berlin, but I think any queer person can relate to at least one story told. Could you have shot the series anywhere else? If so, where? I know you said a little bit about this earlier, but if you were to make it anywhere else, where would you think would be most likely?
Well, thank you for your question, Shiv. I think that is a really good question because in some ways it is obviously universal. It's like we're all looking for love. We all feel absolutely terrible when, it doesn't work out. I don't know. It's like in a lot of ways it's completely universal, and it could be set in, a village, except there wouldn't be that many probably queer people in a small village. But I think it's I think it would be very different if it was set somewhere else. There would be a different kind of tone to the experiences. So for sure, I could go to London's the other city I know well, and here obviously. So I could go to one of those cities and make a 10-episode dating thing, but I think it'd have a different vibe. But broadly speaking, yes, that story could be told anywhere. I suppose it was picking on certain things. That the bondage workshop and some of the venue with the hammock episode. It's called Ramavaitrungshalle, and it's a very kind of DIY collaborative queer space. I guess Berlin has a lot more of those type of spaces than other cities because the rents are low and all the rest of the reasons that we all know.
Cool. I just want to ask you a little bit more about putting the piece together, because it moves at quite a pace, and obviously the individual episodes absolutely sort of stand alone. So how did you go about working in the edit to create this kind of tempo that gives you this kind of keeps you so engaged and wondering what will happen next?
Oh, thank you, Helen. That's nice. Well, one thing is we shot the whole series in 10 days, and as anyone that works low budget knows, you don't have a lot of. There's not a whole load more footage that So in a way, I want to sound like it's more, But I think one thing is that we basically shot what we needed. The script was very succinct. I think the full script was like 75 pages or something, so it's kind of like it was always conceived to be this quite just get those moments and get out sort of thing. I worked with Kerry Cronenbeck for the edit. He's an amazing filmmaker, director in his own right. He made the film Maggots and Men and the film Peace of Mind, and he just made a short documentary which is currently doing well. I've just completely forgotten the title. But he's a skilled editor and he's good with the pacing. So I think it was always conceived of being like that. It's always like I said, you don't see where she works. You don't really see. There's not a lot of else going on, is there? So it kind of had to flow like that. And I think with comedy, I think timing's really important. You have to
completely. So we've got one more. I've got another question come in, but just before I asked Jazz's question, I just wanted to follow that up a bit about the humour, because the humour's there obviously in the script, but it's also there in the edit and the way that it's and the way that the cut works to almost kind of to fall on this kind of moment of almost sort of perplexity or frustration or incomprehension on the character of Ren. So that works so beautifully together, the acting, the script and the edit, so to kind of have that kind of moment, which I guess is sort of necessary to be the culmination of the episodic structure.
Yeah, I'm really glad it works because like I said, you do run a risk. I think we're not giving a lot of background on the central character. We're just throwing her. She's played by Alana Lake, who, by the way, is also a really talented artist. I think this is her first acting role, her first lead acting role for sure. She might have done a bit of acting in college, but yeah. So I think it's the humour's really about the situations and about relying on the audience to relate to those situations and kind of see themselves in that. I can't remember the question, Helen.
No, that's fine. It is actually, isn't it? It is all about the realization of the vision through the actor, because that's who you'd identify with as an audience. You've got to really be on her side and empathize with her, and be in tune with kind of understanding what her experiences are to get inside the piece. Which does bring me on to a question really about the you've talked about how you a little bit about some of the people who are in the film, who are friends and fellow artists and so on. But could you say a little bit about how you approached the direction? Were the actors did the actors have to learn the scripts, or was there any level of improvisation that you worked with? Was there any kind of workshopping that brought it, or was it more sort of straightforward? This is what I've written. This is what's going to happen.
What happened, and this is the way that I like to work, is I wrote the script, then I started casting, asking around, getting people to come in, trying them together, and then once you get the person, then you rewrite according to what I know of that person. And obviously almost everyone in the cast was somebody I already knew enough about to be able to write a character. So all the characters are written quite close to, I wouldn't say they're not like a version of the person playing them, but they're close enough. None of the people, as far as I can remember, were people who had any prior acting experience. So you're really relying on, it's kind of like writing a person that I know that person can embody, because we didn't have either the budget, the schedule, or the, kind of high-class LA acting coach on hand to have got people to leap completely into being, as you would do if you're working in more of a mainstream system where you're kind of auditioning actors cold. But since these were people that I kind of found from my social circle, and also our producers Nadia and Layla, we all together found people. So it's, and then kind of rewriting based upon what had come out in the auditions, which end up being kind of quite workshoppy anyway, and then they should just stick to the script. And that was pretty tough for them, because obviously they've not got acting experience, they've got to learn lines. I don't know how I would do that, and they did amazingly. I think we had a bit of improvisation in the speed dating episode, and a bit of improvisation in the bondage episode. Apart from that, I think everything was completely scripted.
I suppose we haven't had more questions about the bondage episode. Might get there later. So that's really perceptive. And Ralph has asked the question that I think you've just answered, which was about how easy it was to find the actors to play the different parts. Did you audition them, or did you write it for them with actors in mind? Which I think you've just really kind of answered. So thank you for that, Ralph. Yeah.
One thing to add to that is it's really important for me. I always have this really strong commitment to seeing my world on screen. So life would be easier in some ways if I did just go out and get trained actors and, but it's like I just really want to see people like me and my friends on the screen. And I've always done that with every film that I've made. And so that's part of the reason for choosing people. It's not that I wouldn't work with someone who was a trained actor. It just so happens that I'm not often presented with someone who looks kind of authentic, for want of a better word, and is a trained actor.
So Layla asks, why was it so difficult to retrieve the phone from the back of the seat? I must admit, I've definitely had that experience, and when I retrieved the phone, which from the back of a seat in the cinema, it was absolutely smashed. So I was dreading that phone wouldn't be functioning when it was eventually pulled out. Tell us a bit about that scene.
Thank you, Layla, for that question. That's one that's entirely based on true life. So that actually happened, and they've just got this. It's this gay bar called Melita Sundstrom in Merringdam, and it's kind of quite iconic, I guess, or at least I hope so, because I've been trying to springboard off their reputation. But so they have this really long bench, And when I had the date that I had there, and my the date's phone was dropped down the thing, it literally, and the bar was absolutely packed, and we had to get everyone to stand up, and everyone had to pull the tables out, and that's actually true. So I can't tell you why it was so hard, but it's really narrow. You can't get your hand down there, and because it's like this long bench that runs the full length of the bar, so everyone had to get up, and it was a Saturday night, and yeah, it did happen.
Can you tell us a little bit about your other locations? So for those who might have watched who don't know Berlin quite so well, how large is the sort of geographical area? How did you go about shooting in the streets and shooting in the interiors? Did you need to get permissions, that kind of thing?
Well, I guess most of the nightlife locations are actually kind of LGBT venues that I and my team, so there was 5 of us all together making the film. I had Nadia and Layla, who are 2 producers, and Nadia also doubled as the camera assistant, sorry. And then I had Han doing sound, Smina doing camera, and all 5 of us that's our world. So it was kind of like we were already very familiar with those venues. They had seen us, and so I think it was quite easy to approach them. Yeah, so that's one thing, is that because we were shooting in real places that we go anyway, we didn't really have any problems. The club is the one that's the period episode where she drops the moon cup. That's shut down now. That was a really cool game. But yeah, on the whole, we had no issues with the venues. We didn't shoot that much on the street. I'm trying to think if we got permission. I genuinely can't remember. It's possible that we didn't. I don't remember. But it was pretty easy because we just stuck to, I mean, it's not a very ambitious piece in terms of the scope. We just went to places we already knew and kept it simple.
Cool, this worked beautifully. So Julie asks, if some of the episodes are based on real life, have any of the people the characters are based on seen and recognised themselves in the film? Great question.
Thank you, Julie. That's a good question. Well, funnily enough, yes. Funnily enough, because the thing is, it took place, the ones that were based on reality, I mean, sometimes they're not, what's the word, kind of word for word. There's just like a kernel taken from my true experience, and then it's kind of fictionalized. Sometimes they were literally almost word for word what happened. And the funny thing is, so obviously those experiences for me in my life took place over a, 2-3 year period, and then we've squeezed it into, so sometimes it was the case that somebody who, it was so long ago. I would say most of the real original people have actually seen it. And sometimes we had cast someone that was a real date. We've cast them as the date in the other episode. Like, there was all kinds of, I don't want to name names, but it was for sure, there was there was a lot of crossover in terms of who was playing someone in one episode, were they actually the date in the other episode. And at the cast and crew screening, I found myself, sitting next to someone who had actually been one of those dates, and kind of turned to me, was like, can't believe you made a film about our date, so. But, luckily, I mean, I think I've not had any bad experiences from that. I think people were covered enough, I'm not sure of the word, disguised enough that no one else would know it was that person, if that makes sense. For sure, there was nothing kind of identifying to anybody except maybe that the actual person that had experienced it. And from what I've heard from the real people, they really enjoyed it and liked it. No one's unfriended me on Facebook as a result.
That's certainly good to know. So Hetty asks, this is a good question as well, especially it follows on beautifully. Have you thought about doing a follow-up? Where do you imagine Ren being now?
That's a really good question. Is it Hetty or Petty?
Hetty.
Hetty. Okay. So, well, this is a really good question because actually in the original script, the final episode was the meditation episode, which was supposed to be a kind of, not only is it quite uplifting, she finally sort of connects with someone in this sort of dorky way, and it seems like somebody who's quite straightforward and possibly not, like dating 7 other people and like, got substance abuse issues or whatever. So that would have been the final episode. It's now episode 9, and the final episode is episode 10. So anyway, when I wrote the script, I did write that episode with the idea that that could form the beginning of a new series, because obviously they have some kind of connection. They're like, I'll see you next week. And then it would be potentially the new series could then focus on what happens between them. When we did test screening, when we were editing, we got the feedback to change that episode so that the Meuble Ulfa, which is the bar where she gets the vacuum cleaner and all the rest, that's now the final episode, which I guess is really nice in that it brings all the characters back together and kind of, you know, ties up a lot of loose ends, but I'm not sure it creates such a springboard for a new series. I would like to make a new series. I probably wouldn't make it about dating again. I feel like I've done that, but maybe something of what happens next, you know, like for example if she goes to meet the meditation person again or whatever. I guess I would need to write it and then get the funding.
Always easier said than done, these things, aren't they, sadly? So Poppy asks, the open use of sex toys and safe sex practices was really refreshing to see on screen. I totally agree with that. Thank you for making something real, but also educational. Could you talk a bit about that?
Well, so this is the thing, is I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself, but I'm all about, like, for me, it's definitely about wanting to see my life, my world, my preoccupations, my, you know, friends, venues, whatever, on screen. So it's not actually a thing about wanting to educate other people, but it's definitely a thing about wanting to depict those things that are important to me and my friends as just being a kind of reality for us, you know. And I just think that that's one of the massive kind of, I don't know, there's been a lot of progress made now with diversity and with more people getting to tell their stories. And I think that's one of the major advantages, is that you get to this window into different worlds, and people get to tell the story their way and show you into their world, rather than having to kind of make it palatable to, you know, I think lesbian cinema for a long time has felt like, oh, it's almost like we need to promote our way of life or something. And I feel like there's lots of people doing that now, and they're doing it very well. And so I can, you know, do my thing. Whereas even 10 years ago, when Break My Fall came out, there was a lot more pressure to be like, you know, you need to be showing lesbians in a certain light. How could you do this or that? And I feel like very, very grateful now that this whole conversation has happened around diversity and representation, and so that the pressure's off me a bit, and I can just put dildos on the bed and, you know, whatever, and not feel like I have to speak to every lesbian out there, you know, because it's kind of a Mixed Messages is set in a very specific subculture. It's not really a representation of lesbian life per se. It's like a very specific kind of subculture within the lesbian scene in Berlin, and that's obviously deliberate. But I think in the past, when people have made work in the sort of smaller subcultures, we've felt this pressure to speak to the, you know, the whole community. And yeah, I'm kind of relieved that that pressure's off now for me.
Yeah, very well said, very well said. And it is important. I think it's all to the good, you know, and it makes it more powerful if it's based in personal experience but has resonances and says important things to people and kind of supports their choices. And I think that's the film is very sort of generous in that. It uses humour a lot, but it's very generous in its openness. I think we've got one last question.
I just wanted to say on that that some of a big part of what this is about is also being, you know, an English person in Berlin. And that's nothing to do with sexuality, but it's like, you know, going somewhere new, trying to make a life for yourself, trying to, you know, find a partner or whatever, and being kind of out of your own element, out of your own comfort zone or something. So, and we, I just wanted to mention that because we had some screenings when it first came out that were around that theme, that was screening to like straight audiences, based around it being English speaking but set in Berlin. And I got a lot of very positive feedback from those audiences as well, in terms of, oh, I really feel I'm seeing my experiences reflected. So I think that's another kind of angle on it that's got nothing to do with the sexual orientation or the gender, but it's just about being out of your home city, somewhere new, trying to kind of establish yourself there.
Totally. So this is a bit of a put on the spot question. Let's take a deep breath. Fiona asks, what films would you recommend for watching during the lockdown?
Oh my God, that's a horror.
I know, it's awful because it's the sort of thing people ask me. I always get, I don't know. Yeah.
It's funny you say that. Who was it? Fiona? Is that
Fiona?
name?
Yeah, Fiona.
Fiona, I'm hesitant to become a world authority on lockdown cinema. I wasn't really prepared for that, but I must say, personally, whenever I watch a film now during this lockdown where there's like a group of people, I don't know, they're at a wedding or a dinner, I kind of freak out and panic and think, that can't be safe. Why haven't they got face masks on? So that's quite funny, but that doesn't really answer Fiona's question. I've been watching, do you know what this is a bit embarrassing, but I've been getting really into these kind of quite worthy sort of documentaries. And I feel a bit embarrassed. I feel like I should be watching kind of frothy rom-coms to take the pressure off me. But I've been watching these things like about, Indigenous land rights. And I watched this amazing documentary about this Latina girl bicycle gang in East LA. And it's called, what's it called? Ovarian Psychos. And then these documentaries about Indigenous land rights and things like that. That's probably not anyone else's idea of lockdown films, but I've been kind of, I don't know why, I've been really drawn to all these kind of quite social issue documentary type stuff, which isn't normally my thing. And I found when I was trying to watch this kind of frothy light stuff, it just didn't hold my attention. So I'm sorry, Fiona, that's probably not the right answer.
Well, I would, I'm sure everybody's seen it already, but if you haven't, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which is just a sheer sort of joy and one of the most beautiful pieces of filmmaking that I've seen. So if you haven't seen it, you must, but I expect everybody's seen it by now. So A asks for your favourite lesbian film. So again, that's a toughie, There's so many different kinds of lesbian filmmaking, and they're all... got their different different attributes, different advantages.
Awful, I can't answer this. My mind's gone completely blank.
Yeah.
Amazing films, and whenever I watch them, I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait for everyone to see the film. But as soon as someone asks me, my mind is completely blank. So I'm gonna pass on that question. Sorry, but
and I'm gonna say watch anything by Barbara Hammer, and I also love the films of Bev Alcock and Sarah Chambers, but they're more harder to get. But I think because we're here at the courtesy and largesse of Peccadillo Pictures, I would definitely check out all their offerings. So one final question, I think, unless anyone gets in very quickly.
There's a couple of web series. There's that, I'm sure everyone's probably seen these, but there's two Los Angeles queer web series that I really like. One of them's called Her Story. And it's directed by Sydney Friedland, and it's kind of set in this milieu of lesbians and trans women, and I really love that. Actually, it's a few years old and it's available everywhere for free. And then the other one is The Gay and Wondrous Life of Caleb Gallo. That's like a really silly, fun gay LA web series, which I really love, which my good friend Elle introduced me to. And so those two just popped into my head, probably because I'm here and they're set in LA. But I think series are quite good because I know we're all struggling with attention. Yeah.
And there's the Carmela series, which is a few years ago. If people like sort of got the Gothic, the vampire scene, which I think you've said it's being remade. Is that right?
There's a feature film.
Yeah, it's a feature film.
Canadian, I think.
Yeah, so that's something to look forward to.
But yes, I don't want to be a world authority because my mind always goes blank, and it's like at school, and then afterwards you think, why didn't I give that answer? And it's too late. And now I've got this horrible performance anxiety, and I need to take some deep breaths.
Well, you've only got one question, and it's not the easiest either, I'm afraid, but it's very important, which is. What advice, this is from Jazz, what advice would you give to young queer filmmakers? And that's something, that's a seminar series rather than a Q&A question, but it's very important because we all love young queer filmmakers and we want them to do a great job.
Thank Thank you for your question, Jazz. I'm not young anymore, so I don't know I feel quite removed from I'm kind of following some young queer filmmakers, but it's obviously not my my situation or my work anymore. I think you basically, number one is you really need to have this what's the word? Not passion, but this kind of like commitment to telling whatever the story is, because you don't know how long it's going to take you before you get the funding and get to shoot it and all of that. So you can't just do this thing of like Saturday night, I'm a bit bored, I'll write the script on a whim. It's got to be something that you're really committed to and really passionate about, because that's going to be the one thing. There's going to be so many kind of dark nights of the soul, and that passion and commitment is going to be what pulls you through. I think having a good team and being not afraid to ask for help, and being kind of really working on whatever human skills you need to collaborate. You know, film is a collaborative medium, and of course I like to say, oh, this is my vision, and you know, but at the same time I could clearly not have done this without the 50 people that we had collaborating. And so a big part of filmmaking is relationships and communication and all of that. And I think that sometimes gets kind of lost in this sort of like, oh, it's the director's vision, and then obviously things like the script, you know, just having something on the page, however it is you work, that you can share with your collaborators and that it can communicate your vision to them, because if that doesn't work, it's going to be really, really hard to make anything else work after that. So I think, like self-belief and belief in the project, good communication, relationships, and good source material, and I don't know, talent, yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Kanchi. Thank you all for your questions. The lovely audience out there that we wish we could see, but we can't, but maybe one day in the cinema. So I hope you'll all want to watch Mixed Messages again, and also recommend it to your friends. You will be able to see the episodic version as well as the full-length version. So the episodic version will be made available thanks to Peccadillo, and I'm sure the details will be on their website. So please please thank Kanchi for being with us this evening in our kind of virtual way, especially as she's beamed in all the way from Los Angeles, and give her a round of applause. Thank you, Kanchi.
Thank you. That was really great questions. Thank you. I love being asked questions, and they were really good questions.
They were good questions.
And thank you, Helen.
Absolute pleasure.
Can we tell everybody that when my first feature came out, you did my Q&A in the East End Film Festival at the Rio Cinema?
Rio Cinema, yeah, which was a fabulous occasion and beautiful cinema. Love the Rio. So just a little bit about next week. So next week's film will be GBF, and the special guests will be director Darren Steen, writer George Northey, and actor Michael J. Willett. And this will be hosted by Jazza John from the Queer Movie Podcast. And I believe if everything is beautifully cued, as I hope it is, we will now watch the trailer.
Explain this to me again. How will being the first out kid in school make you instantly popular?
It's simple. The hottest new trend sweeping schools worldwide is the GBF.
It stands for... I know what it stands for.
Gay best friend.
My future GBF is just waiting to come out of the closet and tell me how fierce I am.
And pretty soon, all 3 prom queen frontrunners will be battling it out for my attention.
Boom!
Are my arms looking Michelle Obama toned or Madonna scary?
Ashley's Mormon.
They smile to your face and probably eat you in the back.
Well, I can't help it that this school is devoid of the gay. I mean, if there were some, they worship me.
Why not send out a mass text and be done with it?
Tanner, you cannot come out via text.
All I wanna get is...
I guess I am. Gay, I'm gay, I guess.
Our very own homosexual! The doors are open,
You don't even sound like the ones on Bravo. We can totally gay you over.
it's not just our physical
seems that many of you girls are treating Tanner as more of a prize to be won than an actual person.
Maybe everyone secretly wants a GBF.
Come on, you call this an ensemble? Get it together, girl.
Do not call me that.
I meant like girl with a U. Girl.